Hey Anthony, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your Essay 2 draft. Just as a reminder for this assignment, I'm taking a look at 4 criteria. First criteria is your thesis statement, whether you have an arguable thesis statement, you're making a claim, and really an interesting claim, and a claim that includes the what I call the roadmap, so being able to see where you're going to go with that thesis statement in your paper. Also taking a look at your ability to use details from the murals and from a couple sources to support that thesis statement. Also looking at organization, and that means that you have similar ideas grouped together, but you also have a reason why you're moving from one idea to another. And transitions help with that. Finally, I'm taking a look at your ability to integrate sources. So those are the 4 criteria, and what I do is I just have some quick comments to myself over here. You'll see like this in here and this right here. These are just quick reminders to myself of things to talk to you about. So I'll just go ahead and talk through my feedback. The most important issue, I think, in this draft is the argument. Right now, it seems like you've got more or less an observation, and something it'd be really difficult to argue. It's hard to take a look at those 2 murals and to not come away with there's a difference between the two. One is bad time, one is good time. And that's about at the level that your thesis statement is at. I think that you have ideas that you're hinting at in here that could make for a more debatable, arguable thesis statement. But that thesis statement does need to shift, which also means that the body paragraphs and what you're doing in them needs to shift a little bit as well. Let me go through the introduction, and I'll get to that thesis statement here in a second. When you're integrating sources into your paper, you need to have some kind of transition between what you've already written to the source information that you're going to try to integrate into your writing. So it is a beautifully well-painted part of history that shows a positive effect after such a horrendous time. And then we go into, in January 9th, we're talking about the flood specifically. So I think I understand how you're going from one to the other. This is a horrendous time. And later on in that quote, you're going to be describing in pretty stark detail what that horrendous time actually was like, or what was going on at that time. But you still need to provide a little bit more transitioning between this information here and the information that comes up here. Down here I highlighted this because a semicolon, you use that when you're combining 2 sentences. And you have 2 sentences here, but the word "but" is one of the 7 words in the English language that we use with just a comma. So it would be like the flood left the city of Portsmouth, devastated and lost, comma, but that was only just the beginning of a small town. So that would be accurate right there. A semicolon, you would do something like this. Semicolon, however, that's one of the words that you could use. Therefore, nevertheless, that's one of the words that you would use with a semicolon. So like I said kind of at the top of the video, this thesis statement, it doesn't have much of an argument to it at this point. It just kind of says that there were good times and then there were bad times. There are a number of different ways to go about this. One is, I've seen one or two people in the class say, and they're talking about the same exact murals that you are. They'll say something like, the 2 murals suggest that when times are tough, the city comes together to support each other, more so than when times are good. And so that 1937 flood mural, I mean, you see the number of people that are included in that mural. There's a lot of folks that are included in that mural. There's a lot of action going on in that mural. But in the good times mural, the emphasis is not really on the people, it's on the place. And so that difference has led some folks to believe that maybe there's something about togetherness going on, particularly during difficult times. That's one way to go about it. There's a word that you keep using in your essay that I think is kind of interesting, and it's the word beauty. You mentioned that both murals are beautiful, and I think that is interesting. Like, I think depictions of what is tragic can also be beautiful, and I'm always drawn to that 1937 flood mural, and it's not because of what's happening on the outside, although that's very compelling. It's dramatic, but it's what's happening in the middle. That solitary rowboat with 1 or 2 people on it in a town that's just kind of ghost-like. It's eerie, but it's beautiful at the same time. So that's a word that I see you using several times. It might be a way to come up with an argument that's got a little bit more depth and has a bit more legs to it. Okay, the body paragraphs, what I noticed is that you have that idea of beauty here as well. I think they're supporting your thesis statement right now, but the thing is that the thesis statement doesn't have much of an argument to it, and I think that they'll have to shift, and you'll have to explain your details and how those details are helping to support that revised thesis statement that you come up with. That doesn't mean you have to completely scrap these paragraphs and start over again, but it does mean that you'll need to cut some of the explanation that you have now. You may need to cut some of the details you have now and include details and explanation that show how all that is supporting. And when I say all that, I mean your details and your explanation. How is that supporting your thesis statement? Right now, what you do is, so far, you list a few details that you see, and then at the end you say the setting shows the depressing hardships that the town had faced. And again, I would argue there's not much of an argument to that. I mean, it's a mural about a flood, and so it's definitely going to do that. But an argument, so what I'm looking for is something that's a little bit more argumentative, something that's a little bit more debatable that you're supporting. And so you include details here, and then you say at the end, yeah, all this equals a depressing hardship. And what you'll need to do is to have maybe one or two details, some discussion about how that relates to your paper's overall argument or the point of the paragraph, maybe a couple more details, some more discussion about how those details support the paper or the paragraph's overall point. So this kind of discussion here needs to be woven kind of throughout the paragraph. Right now it's just kind of at the end of a list of details. Again, this word keeps coming up, and it might be something to think about. And maybe the way to go with this revision, Anthony, is to chat with me with what you're thinking about. If you'd like to meet with me individually, if that's helpful, we can definitely do that. If it's more helpful to you to maybe chat over email, we can, whatever works best for you. But I wouldn't be shy this upcoming week about reaching out to me and saying, hey, I kind of need some help with this. So I'm going to pause this video for a second. I'm going to do a quick to-do list, and then I'll talk about that, and then that will be it. So hold on. All right, Anthony, so here's a quick to-do list for this draft. So first, I think the first and foremost thing that needs to happen is revising the thesis statement, having something that's more debatable, more argumentative. And I've said quite a bit about that already. So item 2, discuss details and explain them throughout the paragraph, instead of like listing details and then saying this equals, all those details equal this idea. You discussing them throughout the paragraph is going to show me how those details equal support for your thesis statement or your paragraph's overall point. Make rationale for paragraph placement clear. I didn't look at this too much because I think the thesis statement issue is probably the bigger deal, but there should be a reason why we're going from the first body paragraph to the second body paragraph. And right now it kind of feels like you could interplay, or you could switch the color paragraph and the setting paragraph and it wouldn't change too much. And it really should. Like you should begin with the first paragraph for a reason. Like it's either your strongest argument or your weakest argument. And whatever reason that is, that should be, your audience should know that. Your reader should know that. And then finally, integrating sources and transitioning between ideas. So transitioning between ideas that you have to the sources that you're going to use, but also transitioning between paragraphs and any switches, any changes that you have between paragraphs. You do that a little bit, like when you go from one mural to another. I think that you use, stuff like that, like in contrast. And that's good. I think more of that, and particularly between the paragraphs, that's definitely needed. Okay, so that's my feedback. Again, don't be shy about checking in with me and asking me questions and seeing if your revision ideas are going to make sense. Happy to help. That's it for now, and I'll talk to you soon.